Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. Do we have any special guests we need to recognize? No, I think we're good.
We can do that
Sure,
after we do the
Okay.
roll call.
Okay, can you do the roll call, Mr.
Sure
Moore?
can. Mr. Hines,
Present.
Ms. Jiggets,
Present.
Mr. Kelly,
Here.
Ms. Link,
Here.
Ms. Revel,
Here.
Mr. Scott. You have a call.
Okay. Can we approve the minutes from the August 21st meeting? You should have received those in your packet. Do we have any additions or corrections?
Madam Chair, move adoption of the minutes.
Second.
Yes. Mr. Hines,
Yes.
Ms. Jiggets,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Stan, I was not here.
Ms. Link,
Yes.
Ms. Revel.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, the financials. It has been requested that we look at the audit report first, so I'm going to change the order slightly, and we're going to look at the fiscal 2018 audit report, which you should also have in your packet. Do you have a representative?
Madam
Yes,
Chair.
yes.
So this morning we have with us the representative from Cherry Beckert to present the audit report. And then we also have the bound copies of the audit.
Madam Chair, can we wait for those to be distributed until she starts?
I did see you don't think
What's happening?
she just will be. She's
Playing with my time. Play Facebook.
We'll start going the other end. Well, after you do that.
Oh, wait a minute, I still
Come back on.
stealing from me.
I was.
I need one.
Pump the brakes on the assembly line before it got to you.
I have mine here.
Good morning. Does everyone have their copies now? All right. So I will go ahead and get started. I am here to present the results of the June 30, 2018 audited financial statements. I understand you were provided a draft copy over the weekend, so I know as we move towards the end of this, we'll get into discussions about whether you want to approve today or delay that. If there is a decision to delay, I just want to make sure we do get these copies back so we can make any changes that are presented as a result of this meeting and subsequent vote. So I do want to call to your attention that we were engaged to audit the financial statements for June 30, 2018. The authority does present comparative financial statements. We did perform that audit last year, and those numbers are also included in this report. Now, our opinions on the audit are on pages 1 and 2, and then on pages 19 through 22. And the rest of these financial statements are that of the authority and management and the board of the authority. So we are here today to talk about the results of the audit. So the audit is not just an audit of the financial statements that you see here today. We are required by state laws to make sure that we also include an audit of your compliance with laws and regulations and to ensure that you have appropriate internal controls over financial reporting and those laws and regulations. Now that understanding of internal controls is what we are required to gain. We are not required to test those internal controls. So we do not issue a separate opinion on the effectiveness of your internal controls. However, if anything came up during our audit, we would be required to report those to you. And those would be reported in that back section on pages 19 through 22. And I will talk about those when I get to the results of the audit. So just to brief you a little bit on the financial statements for the year, I know management goes through the numbers, so I'm not going to go through the numbers with you. However, I just want to talk a little bit about the layout of the financial statements. So on pages 3, we have what's called the management's discussion and analysis. I would encourage you to read that part because it does provide a 3-year trend information, and it kind of talks to you about the financial highlights. So what were the key things that happened through your operations this year? And so that's what I would kind of encourage you to read high level as you're looking into this. And then if you want more detailed, you could get into the actual basic financial statements that start on pages 7. And then subsequent to the financial statements, we have what's considered to be the footnotes. And they just provide a little bit more information on the accounting policies that you use, and then maybe a little detailed information to back up in detail some of the numbers that are presented on the face of the statements on page 7. So that's a basic layout of the financial statements themselves. When we conduct our audit, in addition to the internal control piece, we do test the significant balances and transactions that you see within those financial statements. And our audit's not meant to be all-inclusive of every transaction. We do it on a sampling basis. And we are looking for a material misstatement to the financial statement. So ultimately, that's what our audit says, is that the numbers in here are materially presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So as a result of our audit, moving into the audit results now, I am pleased to tell you that you do have an unmodified opinion that is a clean opinion. In conducting our audit, I told you that if we came upon any matters of non-compliance with laws and regulations or any matters of internal control, we would be required to report those to you. So during the audit this year, we did identify 2 transactions where we proposed audit adjustments. Those are presented in detail in the back on page 21. So I won't go through the detail of those adjustments, but they really relate to the properties that are recorded, primarily those that are donated from another entity to the authority's financial statements. So we did propose 2 audit adjustments. And so when we propose audit adjustments, we do have to consider that an internal control weakness because the operations didn't catch that those financial statements were not properly recorded. And so our audit opinion is unmodified because management did correct and make those financial statements. So as an end result, the financial statements are correctly stated, but we did propose those 2 audit adjustments throughout the course of our audit. So we do have to consider that a weakness in internal control. And so we've talked to management and we've come up with ways to make sure that going forward, those missing transactions ultimately won't happen in the future. So that concludes ultimately the audit opinions themselves. It was a clean audit. You have unmodified opinions, and then we did make those 2 audit adjustments. There were no non-compliance with laws and regulations that we found as a result of our audit. So in addition to our audit, yes?
Go into a little more detail about how that occurred for that $42,156.
Sure.
The benefit of the commissioners and all that.
Yes. There was a property that was sold on June 28th. So it happened right at year end, the year end being June 30. And so when transactions happen at year end, ultimately you want to make sure that every piece of that transaction gets recorded into the year that should be reflected in. Well, a decision was made related to that sale that a portion of those proceeds would get paid back to the city. And so that transaction was actually recorded in July, and it really should have been accrued back to the end of June when that transaction happened. So it's really a 2-day timing difference per se in when it was recorded, and it should have been recorded at year end.
But it was recorded in that July without prompt?
Is our understanding that, well, it either was recorded or would be recorded when the monies got paid back. So I can't tell you the exact, if that actually got paid in July, but yes. So
you're saying that when the transaction happened, June 28th,
yes,
that's when it should have been booked.
yes,
The delay until.
correct.
Commissioners, any more questions? Commissioner Hines?
No, actually, I just wanted to take a minute just to thank staff for answering my questions. I did reach out to them Friday when I saw the draft report, and basically were able to answer the questions. And I appreciate the fact that staff had their finger on the pulse of those questions well ahead of time. It tells me that they worked hand in hand with you throughout this process. So naturally, I guess the one little comment I would have is naturally as a board, our job is to oversight these types of things. Naturally, with a transaction taking place on June 28th and us meeting only one time a month, that time would have passed and we wouldn't have seen that in our financials until the July meeting. So that's the only little piece I think we would
And
add
of course,
there.
the question I think I had raised previously about how we were going to handle that. And so with the understatement of liabilities, so our liabilities increased as a result of the understatement of the $42,156, which is actually the part that came to us from the actual transaction. Okay. And then you can go into the next one, unless someone else has more questions, commissioners.
I guess one
Go ahead.
of, Madam Chair, I guess the one question is naturally we've had probably a similar transaction that's going to be taking place with donated transfers and things of that nature this fiscal year. I assume there's been some conversation about how we would book that so we wouldn't have a similar issue there.
Right.
Yes, sir. We've discussed making sure that we've increased the communication between the two staffs, so that because there are two things to first ensure that everything that's financial gets recorded into the minutes. And sometimes I think there may be some discussions that are happening in a different part of the meeting that that may not get put in, make their ways into the minutes. That will be a double check for us, as long as that happens. And for instance, talking about the fair value of when once property is donated to us, that we know that when finance prepares the statements that we know everything that the EDA staff knows. So Robert and I are going to we'll be working closer with that, and the same thing with the splitting the proceeds, and I know personally I didn't know about that until July when it came up at a meeting in July. So and we didn't capture that. We weren't able to find that in the minutes. So that's the communication that Robert and I have in place to make sure that finance staff can go back and look at the minutes and pick those type things up. Yes, and I started the end of May. Yes, so she.
Yes, I was going to say, and naturally, in all fairness, you did start late, but I guess that kind of echoes back to some of the concerns I've had about when these types of transactions take place. There really isn't a mechanism that says you get this piece and we get this piece. There's really nothing there. But I just want to make the other side of this is when we do want to capture a fair market, of course, because it's required. But the other part of this is we also need to capture what our acquisition cost is as well, because we do make decisions sometimes based on what we have into a particular piece of property. So I don't know if we got to keep a separate spreadsheet or something of that nature, but naturally we probably need to keep all that historical costs associated, land acquisition, cost of lawn maintenance, things of that nature. We do need to keep something separate there. That way we know that if we do make a sale, we're making a positive impact to the financials. So, thank you.
To speak to what Ms. Spivey said, am I correct that there should have been and this question is still legal, there should have been a memorandum of agreement or understanding concerning this particular transaction, the way it was appropriated between the city and EDA to be booked? That would have taken care of the issue about it being in the minutes. And I think in the past, anytime that there's going to be a certain arrangement as to how the proceeds are going to be divided between the city and between EDA, there is a memorandum of agreement or understanding. Am I not correct? Am I calling it by the correct name?
Ms. Jiggins, what you're speaking to is a means of addressing those issues.
Right.
But the question in my mind, and Mr. Miller has a longer history with this than I do, the question is, it's my understanding EDA does not always understand the full development of a deal at the front end. For instance, when the city sends property over to EDA to hold, it's my understanding those proceed splits on the back end, sometimes they're known, sometimes they're decided on the front end, sometimes they're not. So while that might be a mechanism to resolve it at one point, the timing of it would be a bit of an issue, is my understanding.
But we can't.
But that is a means
Right.
of recording outside of say perhaps a discussion, if there was a discussion in closed session, that would be a means or a letter to address how the property would be addressed. You need some recording. Doesn't have to necessarily be a resolution.
Well, I would hope it would be.
To follow up on that, there
Yes.
was a memorandum of understanding on the library building, but as Mr. Ashby noted, I mean, it was too early in the process to know what was going to happen with the proceeds, so it simply provided that it would be decided at the time of closing. So I think it would be a good idea to have some sort of at least memorandum. It doesn't necessarily have to be a memorandum of agreement, but something for the file that could document what's
Once the
happening.
closing occurs,
Right.
to be a matter of record in our minutes so that
Yes.
we know, and it provides for finance and for the auditors.
Yes.
Okay. We have that on record, commissioners. Yes, please.
I think in the past, we've done just that.
Yeah, I think so, too.
Typically, we wouldn't work up an agreement in the front end of a deal anyway, because things are fluid,
Right.
and here we like to be fluid. So typically, as we get to the closing point, that conversation takes place, and we've always had a pretty candid conversation in closed session about percentage splits, if there is any. And
Have it in
it's
writing.
typically done in our, I wouldn't say it's a sales agreement, but normally there is a memorandum done when we close on a property.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we need to change anything here. I think what we have going on is
Just to utilize what we have.
there.
Yeah, it's
We're
there.
doing it.
I agree. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Any other questions, Tracy? Any,
No, I'm good.
Anthony, any?
If I can elaborate on Mr. Kelly's comment, if
Please.
this closing would have happened in April, this probably
Yes.
wouldn't
Right.
be a conversation right now. It's really a year-end timing difference
Right.
that it would have corrected itself naturally had this occurred sooner in the year, because it happened at June 28th. That overlap at year-end and not knowing at June 28th necessarily what this would have been, that's some of the issue for this, post-audit adjustments.
Right, but that happens quite often in the world of auditing. So we have to, be positioned and position ourselves, just like you caught it.
Right.
We want to stay on top of it also. And so I just wanted to be clear, because I'm sure it's going to come up again in some other type of activities that we have with property. So we just want to be as clear as we can on the audit trail, because that's what it represents for the EDA, an audit trail. And so with that, if you would, I guess, go to the,
Sure.
or however you want, the next one, paragraph, the 12 properties, I guess.
Sure. The next audit adjustment that was proposed relates to the 1,500 block property parcels that the Housing Authority transferred or conveyed, donated over to the EDA. And so that transaction occurred during the year. And because the EDA didn't pay any money for that transaction, it represented a zero cost to the EDA. For accounting purposes, when you record donated assets, you do recognize them at a value though. And so we came back to the authority and proposed that they adjust the property on their books to that acquisition value, not acquisition cost. And so that was the adjustment related to the parcels of property conveyed from the Housing Authority. And so we did want to point out that, again, no money was transferred in this process. It was zero cost to the authority. Accounting principles do say you have to record this at value, though. So that's what this audit adjustment represents, is that you're showing this property at value on your books.
I'll defer to the Madam City Manager.
City Manager.
Yes, Mr. Ashby, I was just thinking here and looking at the word donated, that PRJ donated the properties to us, and I'm thinking back over the 30 years of which the properties were acquired were CDBG money that comes to the city of Portsmouth, and the city of Portsmouth during that era passed all of the money over to PRJ. So is donated the right word? That they donated property to us?
I think for
Transferred.
I think the donation aspect in common parlance is what folks would commonly see it because there's no dollar value associated with it. The issue is, as you said, the CDBG monies and funds and obligations don't necessarily follow the current position of the property. So I think from a financial acuity standpoint, given that it is CDBG money, given the purpose for which it was supposed to be dedicated and the repurposing of it, it is probably a rightful return to the city, given the fact we are the authorizing party as it relates to CDBG funds, and that those are the ones tied up in that property. But donation is probably what it looks like on the books today, but that doesn't capture the whole transaction.
So it's a transfer.
It's a transfer.
So it still has to be booked, not at zero, but at the fair market value.
Correct.
That was actually my question was, were we marketing this as fair market value, as maybe a real estate appraisal, or did we use the city assessment as the basis for this 316? How did we arrange to that? That's my question.
We left the decision to management ultimately,
Right, I'm just-
and conservatively, they used the assessed value.
City assessment.
It's assessed
Okay.
value.
And if I could just chime in on that, we've had a working arrangement with PRHA on these types of transactions, and since HUD requires fair market value, we either take city assessment or an appraisal. We'll take either one. So if you're using the city's assessment, that's perfectly fine as far as the CDBG program is concerned.
Thank you. That was going to be my follow-up. Thank you.
All right.
Any other questions on that?
Should we say donated?
So I do actually have one, I'm sorry. So for this next one that we just recently did when we had our meeting with City Council, and there's some properties that are transferring or have transferred, for this fiscal year, we would do a similar process with those 10 or 12 properties, I guess, that's happening. We would assess them at city assessment as well and book them in a similar
Unless there's
way.
been an appraisal done, yes.
Okay.
And whichever is lower or higher.
We'll take either. Generally speaking, if you have an appraisal done, it's higher, we're going to take the appraisal. So if you have an appraisal done, then that becomes fair market value as far as we're concerned. But
The question is, do you incur the cost for the appraisal?
Right.
Or just go with the assessed value. And so
Thank
I'm
you.
thinking, and so Commissioner Hines, summarizing what you said, with these additional properties, it will be assessed value coming from PRHA or either
And just,
appraised value.
if I could elaborate a little bit more, typically,
do.
you don't get to an appraisal unless there's a buyer. You know,
Right.
usually that's what'll happen, say PRHA, and as Brian well knows, when they're negotiating with a buyer, quite often there's an appraisal done. That appraisal then becomes the basis of the fair market value. Transfer back over to the city, typically not going to be an appraisal done, so it'll take it as assessed value. That's sort of general operating practice.
That's okay. Great, thank you.
Okay. So in addition to the audit reports, there's some additional information I am required to tell you about. We do address it in this separate letter that we provided. There were no changes in accounting standards or accounting principles in the financial statements, so the numbers that you see from year to year are comparative and reflect the same types of accounting principles and standards. So there were no changes there. We did not encounter any difficulties conducting our audit, so we had full cooperation from both EDA and finance staff and management. So we're very thankful to all of them for their consideration and assistance during the audit. As a result of the audit, we do require that management provide us a letter at the end that tells us that they provided us all of the information that we needed to conduct our audit, that they answered all of our inquiries truthfully, and that they provided us, again, everything that we asked for and needed to conduct our audit. So management did provide us with that letter. They signed and provided us with that letter as of the date of our audit report. I do not have any other matters. We already talked about the audit adjustments. Lastly, as a part of the audit, we are required to be independent with the EDA and with the city. So I am pleased to tell you that we are independent. That is likened to your conflicts of interest. That means we have no relationships or financial interests. That would create a bias in order to maybe provide you an audit opinion that you ultimately didn't warrant. So we are independent with both the EDA and with the city. So ultimately, that concludes what I need to tell you as a result of the audit, and I will be glad to take any more questions that you might have.
Do we have any questions?
Do you
Mr.
have
Rice?
just one follow-up question? Any changes in the coming fiscal year that we should know about?
I'm not aware of any significant changes in the next couple years. In fiscal year 2021, the standard for accounting for leases will change. And so management will ultimately need to address what type of impact that has to your financial statements. I'm not aware of a significant number of leasing arrangements. But that standard will, in effect, now make all leases as one type of lease. And so what that will do is anything that was historically an operating lease, where you essentially pay each year and then only record a disclosure in your financial statements, you'll now be required to project out those lease payments and record a right-to-use asset and then an offsetting lease liability on the face of your financial statement. So there's really a grossing up effect of your statement of net position, but it is a change that, again, it's not effective until 2021.
Okay, and that will impact us. The only other concern I had was the phrasing on page 22 of the auditor's recommendation. I felt that it actually should say that the city's finance department implement a process to ensure that all transactions are communicated to the authority in an appropriate and timely manner. And that is because we utilize the city's staff to put forth the transactions and everything. And you and I can talk about that more after the meeting with Ms. Spivey. Are there any other questions, Tracy?
No, ma'am.
You sure?
Lack of coffee, but no, I read these on Saturday, so I'm good.
Okay. I guess my only other question, and that would speak to Ms. Spivey. You all have already made the changes that the CPA has recommended as it pertains to the August and September financials. Is that correct, or it has not been made yet?
I'll ask Ms. Evans.
It's on our side.
I'll let her answer, please.
Anything that, any changes that were made.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, any changes that were made in the June financials were incorporated into.
From the auditor, from her recommendations, okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I would like to thank Cherry Beckert and our staff for their diligence in getting this audit to us. Appreciate your hard work.
Let me take a vote on it.
Okay, so I need a motion to approve this audit.
I motion to approve this audit.
Second.
Mr. Hines,
Yes.
Ms. Jiggets,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Link,
Yes.
Ms. Rebel.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, now we'll go back and do the August and September financials.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
The total net position for August was 14.104 million, and in September was 14.079 million. Total revenues for August were $1,167, and total expenditures were $26,900 for a net loss of $25,732. Total revenues for September were $146, and total expenditures were $25,160 for a net loss of $25,013. Total expenses for the development properties were $26,900 in August and $15,670 in September. Cash and temporary investment balance was $1.785 million in August and $1.773 million in September. Grants available to be awarded was $298,000 as of 9/30/18. Ending pooled cash balance was $126,407 in August and $138,395 in September.
Do we have any questions about the financials?
Okay, I have a
Trying to bounce back and
question.
forth between 2 months.
Okay. Ms. Jiggets?
Yes. On the September statement, what is exactly that accounts payable for $13,172?
So it would have been some invoices that the expense was recognized, but the check hadn't gone out the door by the end of September. So we would have recorded that as accounts payable at the end of September.
That's what that was?
Yes.
Okay, my other question, I did not see the lease payment from the Renaissance for that $10,416.67 for September.
It did not go through the bank statement in September,
Okay.
and that's how we record it.
And under the Victory Village for September, we're showing $6,572 as the grounds maintenance. Are we sure that's what that is? And not legal?
I can check on that and get back to you on that. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a,
Huh? They're gonna stop making us last and start making us first. Prepared.
Just like to make one small comment.
Go
and
ahead.
I'll be done. Thank you for your time. And this is really something that perhaps it'd be a blessing of the treasurer here, but if you guys could, when you go through these breakdowns, telling us our net position is fantastic because we're recorded, everybody sees that. But one thing that can be helpful for us are typically line items that we wouldn't know about. Like when you have the economic business development line items and things like that. it helps us if we have kind of an idea of what those are. Things like insurance, we kind of know what that is. Insurance is insurance, things like that. Lawn maintenance, stormwater fees, we get that. But when there's things that there might be any ambiguity.
Ambiguity.
Thank you. I'm tongue-tied here today. Thank you. That would just be helpful for us, and you can always highlight it. We'll never tell you you're talking too much, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's correct. That's right. Thank you.
2 seconds if I could.
Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Hines.
I just had, just a point of clarification regarding the September financials on the grants awarded, safety and security grant from Pam's Hair Designers. I'm assuming that was an administratively approved?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that that was the case. Thank you.
Commissioners, going back to the audit and things that occurred, this reflects the reason for deciding going forward back in July to file the reports for audit rather than voting on them as a commission. And so I'm glad that we implemented that process. On that note, I don't mind us entertaining a motion for the August financials, but for the September financials, I think we need more detailed information on my questions to be answered. Commissioner Hines?
Actually, Madam Chair.
Mr. Hines.
Thank you. I just need to ask a question of clarity regarding the City Council's discussion about with PRHA and the transfer of the properties. Has that transaction taken place?
Yes.
And if it has, should it be reflected in the September financials for us to vote on accepting that with those? Now we're accepting them and taking in the acquisition costs as we just learned from Sherry Beckert. Should that be captured in the September financials?
That should be captured in the September financials. That was something that happened September 25th. We were set to talk about that later this morning. And that when this item came about from the audit in talking to finance and having the necessary amounts as far as the assessed values, staff is going back to obtain those. But we were going to talk about that this morning. That happened on the 25th. That would have been after your September meeting. However, anyway, so it would have come into October. But based off what we have learned in the audit, we are prepared to brief you on it this morning, but there will be some additional information we will have to come back with as we talk to finance staff.
So this would be actually it's just a follow-up question. So that transaction would actually take place in our October meeting, since we're essentially voting on something that would have already happened, or should we maybe delay per
We're going to
Ms.
delay the September financial.
Jiggett's recommendation, capture it into September, and then vote on it with the September and October meeting?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm agreeable to that.
So, my recommendation is that we file the August financial statement for audit, and that we delay any filing of the September financial statement for audit until next meeting,
Okay.
along with October, to give finance the opportunity to make the necessary corrections as recommended from our CPA firm.
Yes. Yeah. And I think we do have an introduction that needs to be made, I believe.
I do. I have a couple of things. First, I want to let you know that Miss Susan Evans will be leaving the city this week. Wish Susan well in her next endeavors, and then I also have an introduction. Wendy, if you'll stand up. Wendy Hugh is the city's new assistant CFO, and Wendy will be taking the EDA accounting responsibilities over. Wendy comes to the city with a huge amount of finance experience in the Hampton Roads area, and she is a CPA, and she is very in tune to accounting standards, governmental accounting standards, and we're just thrilled to have Wendy here.
Welcome.
Really nice people, don't be scared.
Every now and then. Audit days are always the hardest.
Right, if I could just add to what Mrs. Spivey said. It has already been said to me by some city managers in the region that when I came in 2015, there were 15 positions, including 12 department heads vacant. And right after I got here, deputy was vacant, and most people thought that Portsmouth could never build a team. However, our finance team that we have now already has been heralded as one of the top in the region. Mrs. Hugh comes from Isle of Wight, where she was the chief financial officer over there. And then we have Mrs. Spivey, who has come in less than 8 weeks, and they said that couldn't be done, was certified by the state of Virginia with her CFO. And the team is continuing to build. We have a new budgeting director that will be coming on board in a couple of weeks. So trust that this is a team certified and knows finance.
Thank you, Dr. Pat.
Great.
If I could. So I guess this is a good segue, or maybe not a good segue, into a couple of things. Certainly we have, as staff, I do want to give kudos to our colleagues in finance. We have done, I think, a great job in working together. Both of us kind of coming into our positions newly at the city, but understanding the importance of communication. We are dedicated to making sure that our staffs communicate, but more specifically, we as department heads communicate regularly. But I do want to give kudos to my partners and colleagues there. This also may be a good segue into the treasurer, Ms. Jiggets, Commissioner Jiggets, has consistently offered the EDA's assistance when it comes to the economic development staff and the economic development office and other items such as travel and things of that nature. If we were allowed per the chair, we would like the opportunity to work with Ms. Commissioner Jiggets to take her up on that offer. We have had growth in our office. We've had changes in our office from a standpoint of the office itself. We've also identified opportunities for us to travel where we may need or look to assistance from the EDA for that travel. So just want to put that out here publicly that we may reach out to the treasurer to have some of those discussions.
Okay, above and beyond what we've put into the budget, right?
I think we can state, if you allow us to go above and beyond, certainly. But from what we have identified, we should be able to stay within the budget.
Okay.
If I just may add one thing on that, naturally, even if the travel is going to lead to opportunity, even if it goes above and beyond our budget that we have in that line item, I personally would support that, because we need to make sure you're in front of the right people. And that's our role here as an authority, is to help you in any way possible. So I just want to make sure
That's true. Of course, we
very clear.
certainly welcome PPIC joining us in this initiative.
looking like a true treasurer, Commissioner Jiggets.
We will certainly
That's my
remind them.
concern.
I'll
take that back.
You take that.
They have been very supportive, and we will. They have been very supportive.
I
Very
think they
supportive.
will.
Yes. Very supportive. I think I have the next item.
Okay, and so we've come to the properties update in the old business, and Mr. Moore.
Yes, and this is, thank you, Madam Chair. This is old business. However, it does contain some new information. If you can you hit that for me? We've spoken at length this morning about CDBG, or Community Development Block Grant properties. And yes, the cat is out of the bag. You all did receive approximately 19 parcels via 10 deeds from PRHA to the EDA. And I'll go over that briefly this morning, but I wanted to be clear as we have our two resident CDBG experts in Mr. Bob Baldwin and Mr. Brian Donahue. When it comes to these properties, there are certain requirements with regards to what the property can be sold for, what it can be utilized for, and where those monies end up after the sale happens. I will turn to my Assistant Director and Assistant Secretary, Mr. Brian Donahue, to kind of explain that briefly before we go into the properties.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. That is correct. There are restrictions that do come along with the use of CDBG funding, which is a HUD funding stream. And essentially what that requires is upon the point in time where a property is disposed of for fair market value, which we discussed earlier at this morning's meeting, those funds do need to be returned to the program. It's defined as program income, and that does go back to the city into the city's CDBG program account.
So there are, again, approximately 19 parcels, and I want to back up just for a brief second. This property update was requested by Commissioner Scott, who is not here today, but certainly can see this video, and as well an update per Mr. Hines. Part of this update will be an open session, and then due to the sensitivity of some other information, part of it will be done in closed session. Essentially, we have worked with PRHA and looked at their CDBG properties that they hold that are currently vacant, and we have looked at and kind of divided the properties up into, I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Baldwin, 3 sort of categories: residential, non-residential, and then who wants these kind of situation.
That's so cool.
So
landed on non-residential. Not
at this point, you all have we flipped the coin and we kept the non-residential. But in all seriousness, we have a number of properties that have come over. Looking at the properties, we have gone through this for over a year now and looking at the properties, and we've determined that all of these properties have a value associated with them to the EDA. Here is a list of those properties. Some of these properties you will see are adjacent to some of the properties, are very close to the properties that you all own. 1020 High, for example, that 110 is actually 1100. That is a typo there. 602 Fifth Street, we will discuss that briefly later on this morning. We also have maps attached, again, so that you understand where we are. When you look at High Street, this would be the Mary Jane property. That is the former Oasis, if I'm not mistaken, at 1200 High Street or 1100 High Street. This is Primrose, which is adjacent to what is your Evans Electric property. Again, 602 Fifth Street, we'll discuss that later on this morning. This is the property, this is 818 County, and this is some adjacent property that has been transferred to you all, as well as some more on Queen and High, and a couple properties on Deep Creek Boulevard. The reason why we are bringing this to you this morning is, again, because later on we will discuss our plan, if you will, for some of these properties. And again, based on the sensitivity of some of this discussion, it will be done in closed session. But we have been advised, following the audit, that we need to make sure that these are recorded properly, and so we will work with finance to make sure that is done correctly and properly. But again, just wanted to kind of give you an update on these specific CDBG properties. Any questions before I go forward?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Hines.
All right, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. We would book these at the fair market value, which is required, or assessed value, and we would then have to sell them at a fair market value, and whatever dollars would go back into CBDG funds
Goes
And
back to
then-
the federal
and to
government.
the, right.
Goes back.
Anything over, so the question I have would, anything above and beyond that, would that be for the authority to retain, or would that all go back to the CBDG
All go
program?
back. All.
Okay. The second question is say there's a parcel that's $400,000 and we sell it for $300,000. Could we, and the business opportunity was such a way that it was very beneficial to the city. For example, it adds 50 jobs or whatever the case may be. Could we pony up the extra $100,000 as a city to make the program whole?
Yes. And we'll mention too, just when you go through the process of selling property, there's also the costs associated with any, surveys, title insurance. That's all recoverable through the CDBG as well. So it's really a net proceeds. There's what's considered, reasonable costs associated with a sales transaction that can come out of the CDBG proceeds. So you don't have to, the EDA would not have to eat any of those costs, for example, for any legal work or anything of that nature.
But I think I saw on the first slide for lawn maintenance and general maintenance, we would actually cover that, and we would need to actually carve that out and keep a separate accounting. And then I'm just making
That's
sure.
just a separate cost of the EDA. It's not attached to the property.
Can't net it out of the CBG grant.
Are you saying we
Right,
can't
so-
recover that?
Well, we would never recover the maintenance.
Not for like lawn maintenance, those types of things. Those would be regular EDA costs.
Oh, well, that brings up another question. When these properties came from PRHA, were their funds also transferred
No.
for us for maintenance?
Zero.
No.
So
Are we allowed to go back and ask for that from PRHA?
They don't have the money. And these are, and I explain again that it was the city's decision 30 years ago for CDBG funding that came solely to the city to be transferred to PRJ. Why, over the years, I asked the question of former city manager, I never could get an answer. With that said, they are all of these properties that were purchased, while the agency may have been PRHA, the owner of these properties, actually the city, whose federal monies came in, and that's how they use the money. So PRJ does not have a separate fund for these properties that are coming back. They are maintaining and having difficulty maintaining the properties that they have with the money that they have. They have properties that they must maintain. Mr. Ashley.
Madam Chair, just for the benefit of the commission, the real estate group, which has been addressing and scheduling the formalization of the transfer of this property, did have that discussion early on. And I'm not sure if the EDA is aware, but certainly the city council was aware and the staff was aware. Part of the reason for this transfer is because EDA had the means and the demonstrated experience of disposing of these properties rather quickly at minimal expense. In that discussion, Mr. Moore explained, and as we gathered the last several months in terms of doing this, is the expectation that this will not increase your budget from a maintenance standpoint significantly in the time period it will require to move this forward. However, as you know, I'm telling you what your EDA, well, let me be fairly clear. Ms. Meg Pittenger, who does this work on a regular basis, did an estimate. Mr. Moore provided the budget. So we've done the analysis. So it's not a guess. It was the analysis done in terms of the expense that would be incurred. So that was part of the discussion in adjacent with the time period. But council is certainly aware there's some expenses. I made that clear because some EDA members have always made that point every time we get into a property. So council is aware of the expense. We've made those adjustments and assessments, understanding when those properties were coming in and what the EDA was capable of doing in terms of disposing of those properties.
Can I ask, I have one other question of Mr. Baldwin. For those CDBG properties, are there other alternate grant funds available through the Housing Authority to help offset creatively.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, I just
Not that
wanted
I'm
to
aware of.
ask.
Part of the reason that PRHA wanted to get rid of these properties was to eliminate that expense that they don't have funds for either.
Yes, I understand.
This is all done to save PRHA some money, to get these properties sold more quickly, all at the direction of the city council, basically.
Yeah. No, I was
And
just
with the
wondering.
blessing of.
Yes, I
Are these-
understand. I just thought, sometimes there might be something in HUD coffers that could,
Unfortunately,
be
no.
used something different.
Unfortunately, no.
Wishful thinking.
Call it alt CDBG support, supplement. I just thought I'd ask the question. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Madam Chair, the city manager.
Oh, I'm sorry.
One of the things, as Mr. Ashby said, and we know, that this body is an opportunity for some properties that have been sitting in the city for 30, 25, and there were time frames from HUD for when these properties were acquired that they were supposed to move forward. So we are confident that this body is going to help us in order to get this where it needs to be and not have this 30-year, 25-year history of some seated property. So you're moving it forward.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Hines.
I just got a question maybe of staff or of somebody, if I may. Could we get what our financial impact is estimated to being? Because we also do have a fiduciary duty to ensure that we adequately budget dollars for the estimated maintenance that you guys have already worked on. Secondly, I wouldn't feel like I'm doing my duty is not bringing this out. There was a discussion, and a very good discussion with council when we went around this idea, but I believe the discussion point was there was going to be some information brought back to us prior to the actual closing and acceptance of these properties. So while I think it's an excellent idea, and our rock star over here is moving stuff faster than we can fill the shelves with, so I think it's a great opportunity. I just want to make sure we address that in the future transactions a little bit better, so where the authority is more aware of what our financial impacts are going to be.
Yes.
Because I didn't even know this till today, that we can't sit here and talk about having to carve out maintenance and things of that nature. I think maybe as a authority, we should have pushed for a little bit more further understanding about the impacts of the CBDG and restrictions of the CBDG funds. So just a little piece of information that I'd like to put out there for everybody.
I think it comes under lessons learned, but I think I did hear you say, a director, that what the costs will be for the maintenance upkeep
Yeah,
for us,
we
and
have,
we'll be
we have the
sharing
estimates.
that.
We have the estimates from Ms. Pittenger, but we're also having your current maintenance company look at the cost and estimate the cost for us. So you have that because on your financials you will see that each one of the properties lays out individually the costs year to date for maintenance for each property. I would say, not to put a damper on this great discussion, but we still have to get into closed session so we can talk about these properties. So if we could, so if we could, because that might alleviate some of the questions and concerns.
I do have one easy question.
Yes, sir.
Are these all lots?
Yes. Except for 1200 is the old Oasis building, I believe.
Just say
Yes.
that.
Is
Just say
that in a
that.
position where it needs to be condemned, or is it in a good position?
That is a lot.
That's a lot.
The building was
That
demolished.
was demolished. Okay, that's
several
what
years
I'm
ago.
thinking
But
of next
the
one,
Oasis
Jason, too. Yes, that was
Oasis
demolished.
all lots.
Correct.
So, yes, it's all lots.
But a positive spin. I'm excited about the property.
Yes,
There's
I'm
some-
hoping
there's
you're
some
more-
great
even more
pieces there.
positive in.
There's some really great pieces there, and I think we'll do very well with it.
So,
Mr. Moore, is there any more of the update that you want
not
to
right
do in
now.
open
Not right now. Not in open
Rest is
session.
in-
Rest is in closed session. If I could, I'd like to move quickly into the, because I know we have
Yes,
some
we have
holiday notes. Small Business Week, you will see on your items in new business. We just want to make everyone aware that is actually veteran business owner Small Business Week is coming up November 5th, actually November 5th through the 9th, but they have a couple sessions and events happening on the 12th and the 13th. what we would like to do, because in working with SBA on Small Business Administration, we have been made aware of this. This is separate and apart from your, Small Business Saturdays and things of that nature. And then you have your National Small Business Week, or Small Business Month, actually, which is in May. Just recently, the PPIC recognized Manufacturing Day via a proclamation with City Council. So we were hoping that maybe this body would allow us the opportunity to quickly get it in front of the mayor to have on next Tuesday, or a week from tomorrow, a proclamation presented regarding this event. At that event, we would like to have 2 members, preferably the chair and the vice chair, but the chair and whoever she so chooses to be there to accept. Certainly the rest of the commission is invited. But we think this would be a great opportunity to recognize what is the backbone, certainly, of our community, which is small business as well as that veteran population.
I think that's a fantastic idea, and I think you kind of read my mind. I was going to ask if we could do something similar to what PPIC did.
So Mr. Armand Smith is heading up this project, and he will be handling our small businesses, our small business recognition going forward. So we will work with him to get that proclamation done and have that ready for the mayor. Yes, ma'am.
Madam.
When is, because they have it across the nation, is the Small Business Saturday during this week?
No, Small Business Saturday is normally the
late in-
Saturday after Black
Thanksgiving?
Friday. Yes, ma'am. Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And then there's a National Small Business Month, Small Business Appreciation Month.
Okay.
Is in May. And we will do something for that as well.
Madam Chair, if I could just recommend two people for our commission, or our 2 small business owners,
Absolutely.
I think would be extremely appropriate. Considering one of them's not going to be small, but so much longer, it doesn't look like.
I lost my mic around.
And Commissioner Kennedy, yes. And Commissioner, and Chairman Rebel.
Absolutely.
Yeah, everyone can come.
I was talking about for the standing in front. I think
Leave
that
up
would
to
be.
you. So we will work on that and have that out by the middle of this week for review. So we can have that in front of the council.
Thank you.
Next Tuesday.
That's next Tuesday. Should be next Tuesday. We'll verify that because we have to still get it in front of the mayor. But normally it's one of the first items on the agenda.
It'll be one
A council
person.
meeting?
Yes, it'll be a council
Okay,
meeting on
okay.
Tuesday.
And
Yes, ma'am.
Chair, I said to Mrs. Jiggets that there's no number that has to stand with the mayor.
Right,
If the
it's not.
EDA chooses, you've invited all EDA members, and all of them come and be a part of it and stand, so that the public, it is all recorded, can see who those members of EDA are. I think that would be very,
That would be
set a
wonderful.
precedent.
That would be
Very
wonderful.
good. Would you agree, Vice Mayor?
Yes.
That'd be wonderful. Okay.
So Mr. Donahue has 2 presentations here.
I wanted to ask very quickly of council, of legal. Can we approve, do we have to have a separate vote for each application? FIG, IBOG, do we have to have a separate?
If the EDA believes they're going to have an issue about a particular one, you can separate that particular one, but you can respond to them in a group if there are no issues or concerns.
Okay.
Okay. So Mr. Donahue.
Thank you. This morning, we have 4 local incentive program applications before you that require action. And if it's acceptable to the chair, I'd like to present them together. And then if there are any specific questions, we can address them individually, and then you all can take the action that you determine necessary. We have 4 applications for 2 properties. The first property is 3203 Victory Boulevard. We have both a FIG, a facade improvement grant, and an interior build-out grant for the property that DLH Enterprises has submitted an application for. They're doing business as Holiday Motors. They're a long-time Portsmouth business. They're proposing total renovation investment of over $100,000 to the property, including both interior and exterior work. They have requested $23,260 for facade improvements at the property. That will comprise of siding repair, storefront window and door replacement, painting, masonry repair, and signage improvements to the property. At the same time, they're going to be making some interior improvements. They have maximized the potential of the grant at $25,000. That will provide for interior wall and ceiling replacement, light fixture installation, replacement of interior doors, and then bathroom and kitchen renovation work, as well as painting on the inside. So really a full redo of a long-time Portsmouth business there on Victory Boulevard. That work does include some work to a garage at the rear of the property that is eligible as well. Are there any questions on this property? Mr. Henry, Chad Henry, the owner and operator of Holiday Motors, is here with us this morning, so I did want to recognize Mr. Henry. And certainly I'm sure he could provide additional information if you had any questions.
Nice cars in the picture.
They are. They do a lot of business, I understand, in Corvettes, as you can see.
Okay. He's requested just a moment to speak with us. Sir?
Hi, good morning. I don't want to take much of your time. I just, first of all, appreciate the opportunity to be here. January marks 45 years since my father opened Holiday Motors. And, we've been here a very long time. I live in Portsmouth. I eat in Portsmouth. I sell most of my business to Portsmouth. And I think that it would really, make a difference to Holiday Motors, to brighten it up quite a bit more. The building right there is 30 years old. We're just a few blocks away from Tyward Community College. And, again, thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Great. Thank you for coming.
Madam Chair, I just had one real quick question regarding the shed. Is the shed viewable from the street? Is that a...
It's much bigger than a shed. It's almost as wide as the front of the building. That's 40 foot. It's a 2-car frontage garage, but very deep. It's about 30 foot by roughly 25 foot, I believe. It's the original siding that was on it when it was moved from the front of the property to the back when this building was built. And it's across that back fence line, which is Gus Lane. So it's very visible.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure it was visible.
Yeah, to residents as well.
Yeah.
Residents or passerbys?
Correct.
Both?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Yes, please.
Been in this business for a long time. They're a salt-of-the-earth kind of business to have here in Portsmouth. As you see, the pretty nice little Corvettes right there is kind of one of their niches. They people who are looking for Corvettes, amongst other cars, they're known for that. People come from everywhere to find, and if I'm not mistaken, they've sold cars overseas from this location. So they're not just local, they're now international. But it's a well-run operation. We're glad to have them here. And as Mr. Henry mentioned, it's right down the street from one of our big focuses, which is the Victory Village area. If you look on one side of that road, there's been a lot of improvements down there. Right 2 parcels next to it, I think we just made a move on a property there, and this might be a good spark to help get some of the neighbors across the street to jump on board and things like that. And while we've been stagnant in Old Town, I'd make a motion to approve this one.
Okay, well, before we
Nope.
do the motion, I just want to say this is an example of extending the coverage and the footprint of this program that we had talked about and advocated before deciding to make it available to the whole city. The Victory Quarter was one of the quarters that I personally advocated for, and then we decided to extend it, and Councilman Moody had advocated to extend the footprint of the program. So your business is certainly an example of what we are trying to accomplish here in the city of Portsmouth. So I think it's a great idea, and I will second your motion.
Point of clarity, that is for both the interior and...
Yes.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second. Can we?
Okay. So we'll do both the FIG and the eyeball
Yeah,
at the
we're
same
going to do
time.
both at the same.
Mr. Hines,
Absolutely, yes.
Ms. Jiggets,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Link,
Oh, yes.
Ms. Rebel.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Very good. Congratulations.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
Next item is 3215 Academy Avenue. We have applications for both the FIG and IBOG program from A&G Group Home. Again, this property is a former location of the Churchland Library. AA&G is in the process of doing a full gut renovation to the property to serve as their corporate office and training center. You'll recall this property transferred to them just a few months ago. They're going to be, again, doing over $400,000 in total improvements to the property. They have requested $25,000 in facade improvements and $25,000 for interior build-out. The exterior improvements will require them to make some accessibility modifications. There will be storefront, window and door replacement, roofing repair and replacement, as well as some masonry repairs and new signage going up to serve the business. The interior right now is essentially an open space. It's been demolished. There's really nothing there, so they're going to be doing a full build-out. That includes the walls, ceilings, light fixtures, bathrooms, kitchens, all of the requirements to operate an office establishment there on the property, also including their heating and air systems. So the interior build-out grant will cover a portion of that work in its totality. This is scheduled to be completed within 90 days from approval. Are there any questions?
Mr. Hines?
Yeah, I just wanted, Mr. Moore, if you could possibly, just for the sake of people maybe watching this video, talk about some of the history regarding this. I believe this was one of the lands that we sold, and then it was a business retention success story, if I remember Chris correctly. I think it would be good for people to know that.
This business is a business that's located in Portsmouth, has been located in Portsmouth for several years. They were looking to relocate. They could not find, a building, and they were looking ultimately in Suffolk to relocate near Harborview. This building came back on the market. If you recall the history of this building, it was on the market, then it was off the market, and it was on the market, and held by the city at one point due to all of the insurance and things of that nature. But as soon as this went back on the market, this is one of the first projects that I worked on and coming here into Portsmouth. They love the building. We saved 45 jobs. We're adding another 25 to 30 jobs. This building was sold. It was part of one of the fortunately, it was one of the findings on the budget. But it did close just recently, June 28th, on the property. They are ready to go. And it just so happened this all coincided at the same time with the expansion of the local incentive program. But this is definitely a success story. This will be a corporate headquarters for almost 100 employees. And what they do here is they certainly have group homes throughout Hampton Roads, but this is a training facility for their employees, as well as a drop-off and training facility for those individuals who are recovering from strokes and other different matters where they need to learn to do everything from make a bed to wash dishes. So this will be a training facility for that. So we certainly, staff recommends approval, and we look forward to you all's approval as well.
I think it shows a classic example that we are indeed open for business. And, with this particular property, it'd be good for, I guess, to point out that what we gained in this was about $42,000. What we are going to furtherly expend sounds like another $50,000. So I think it would be wise for people to take note that this city is amenable to business, and we are willing to invest in business.
Very much so.
Dr. Pat?
I was just going to look at it from a standpoint of progress. This was the Churchland Library, of which
My first job.
first job
When it was brand new.
busting at the seams by the time the 80s came. Churchland continues to be our fastest growing community, and with council's vision, built a new library right on High Street. where the old Coleman's Nursery was. And now this building, instead of tearing it down, this solid building, I was saying, this is a solid, that is real brick. That's not any prefab. And it's come out as we've looked at the building. Now it's going to become the headquarters for business that has been in our city and going to hire 30 people. That's real progress.
Yes, this is very exciting.
It is.
Wake up.
Right.
It's exciting. Let's see some smiles. This is great. I know it's Monday.
I like seeing brick buildings preserved.
We can vote on these two together if I can get a motion.
I so move.
I second.
Mr. Hyde.
Motion is to
Approve both.
Motion to approve both. She said to approve both, I said so moved.
All right. Mr. Hines.
Yes.
Ms. Jiggets.
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Ms. Link.
Yes.
Mrs. Rebel.
Yes.
Motion carries. All right. The next item,
Thank you for bringing us two great projects.
I'm going to bring you
There's a
a
third.
couple more. 4,000 Victory Boulevard, which was Farm Fresh and is going to be a Farm Fresh.
Where's the fried chicken?
Well, once you approve this, we can get that rolling. So what we have is, this is another example
Tourist
of,
attraction because there's only a few of them left.
this is another example of the city being open for business. I think the EDA understanding what we have in streamlining the process. This is a interior build-out grant that was $10,000 or less, and as you all agreed back in July, these items could be approved administratively by 2 members of the board. This was reviewed by Chairman Revel and Commissioner Hines. Originally, it would have been the LIP committee, which would have been Chair Revel and Commissioner Link, but there was a conflict there, which again, it was a good thing.
Yes.
It's business for you. But this is $10,000. It has been approved already. We are doing this as an advisory, if you will. They are replacing the entire refrigeration inside of the store, as well as, that's just what the $10,000 is going to be used for. They are replacing all the fryers, everything. So the chicken will be brand new grease. Everything.
Might not taste the same.
Might not. I don't know.
I agree.
Oh, it's
I
the
agree.
same.
So,
I agree.
But this is a wonderful opportunity. Farm Fresh is only opening up. The same owner, J&J Markets, International Markets out of Richmond, owns this. The license to this store, a store in Virginia Beach at Chimney Hill, and then a store in Newport News. So we are excited. We are working with the mayor's calendar to do and this has not been announced yet, but it's on tape now. We are working with the mayor's calendar to look at the first week in November as a ribbon cutting. I believe they may open up as early as November 2nd for a soft opening, just to make sure the chicken tastes right. But then there will be an official ribbon cutting the first week of November. I am anticipating it being the 9th, which is a Friday, November 9th. So be a grand reopening. People have been calling nonstop once they thought they might get some chicken.
It hit Facebook, and Facebook lit up like fire. The vice mayor says, "What is this they're talking about Farm Fresh?" I said, "It's coming back." And then somebody started with, "Will they have the chicken?" Hundreds and hundreds of
We
people.
applied the recipe to the. That's part of the Farm Fresh deal.
I think that's great.
Someone saw someone working in the store. This is what confidentiality will get you. They were working in the store. They came out, and someone asked them what was going on. Oh, this is about to open back up. So that's when it hit Facebook, and it went crazy. But we are excited. I think the community is excited. And then when we talk about some other things in closed session, those people will be excited too. So this has been approved. We have the development agreement ready for the chair to sign. I'm on this one today, so we can move forward with that and keep this ball rolling.
Yeah.
It's going to keep the name Farm Fresh?
Yes, it's Farm Fresh. It is same everything. Same everything. We only have to change the sign. But what you will have is it will be a Farm Fresh on steroids, because they will be redoing the entire produce and deli/bakery section, much like the Food Lions have done recently.
Actually, I'd like to take a moment because J&J is my first customer when I started my business, and I've grown with them. the produce section and they will bring they have a fish market in their grocery store, Grand Mart in Virginia Beach, that is second to none. You know, you go to the deli and you can tell them what number to slice on. The fish market will tell you. It is absolutely a phenomenal thing that they're building, is that group. And the fact that they bought the farm fresh chicken recipe to go with it, so it's going to be unique. They sell Korean pears and Korean grapes, so they actually bring in these much more unique kinds of produce offerings than we see in a traditional grocery store. I think it's very exciting.
If I could just add one thing, I think this speaks to the momentum in Portsmouth. They could have. There's so many of these farm fresh that are still out there that are still closed, and I think, like I sent an email, I think, to Robert about this. This is one of those opportunities we need to get behind them. They invested in us. We need to invest in them, and talk it up and make this a big deal, because this is it's a pretty good size get for us to not only. It's a concentrated area where we're trying to build around to not have that open storefront. So I would just encourage us all to support that as much as we can.
Mr. Moore, do we know, is Starbucks coming back in there?
I will have to verify that to make sure. From what I understand, everything will remain the same, but I will verify that will be the case. Again, the only difference would be the deli and the produce, from what we understand, but we will verify that.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay, so we need to move to closed session.
We're gonna let the Eagles speak it.
Okay. Whereas the Virginia Freedom of Information Act provides that the Board of Commissioners may hold closed meeting for certain purposes set forth in paragraph 2.2, 3711A of the Code of Virginia of 1950 as amended, and whereas in compliance with the requirements of the Code, the topics to be discussed are set forth below in the subparagraphs in paragraph 2.2, 3711A, authorizing discussion of the topics in closed session are set forth in parentheses after each topic. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners shall meet in closed meeting for the purposes of discussing disposition of publicly held real property interests where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body. 409 McLean Street, 1500 block of High Street, and various other EDA-owned properties. 3. For the purpose of discussing or considering the investment of public funds where competition or bargaining is involved, where, if made public initially, the financial interests of the governmental unit would be adversely affected. Incentive grant. 6. And for the purpose of consulting with legal counsel pertaining to actual or probable litigation, where such consultation open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body. The Commons at Portsmouth Center. 7.
Motion.
A motion to go to closed session.
Second.
Mr. Hines,
Yes.
Ms. Jiggets,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Link,
Yes.
Ms. Rebel.
Yes.
Motion carries. We're in closed session.
Resolution directing the Virginia Freedom of Information Act certification required by Section 2.2-3712D of the 1950 Code of Virginia as amended be included in the authority's minutes of this meeting. Whereas the authority has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with its provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. Now therefore be it hereby resolved that each commissioner, unless his or her prior contrary statement is in the minutes of this meeting, hereby certifies that to the best of his or her knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under this chapter, and only such business matters as were defined in the motion by which closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting by the commissioners.
Second.
All right. Mr. Hines,
Yes.
Ms. Jiggets,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Link,
Yes.
Ms. Rebel.
Yes.
You're in open session.
Okay. So now we need to vote on the resolution for 409 McLean Street.
Yes.
Do I need to read this?
She does not need to read that.
Everyone received that resolution, right? Does anyone want it
Everyone
read
get
in?
this resolution?
It'll be attached to the minutes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the resolution, 409 McLean Street.
A second.
All right. Mr. Hines,
Yes.
Ms. Jiggets?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Ms. Rebel?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. And then the grant.
I move to approve an incentive grant not exceeding $4,000 to interchange for infrastructure improvements.
Second.
Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Ms. Jiggets?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Ms. Rebel?
Yes.
Motion carries. That's all we have.
Okay. Anybody got any announcements for the good of the cause here?
Yes. Or comments?
Yes,
You
or
normally
comments,
say
yes.
comments or announcement. The first thing I would like to ask, and I spoke with the director about this briefly before the meeting, if the director would consider sending a staff person to the PRHA board meetings, because PRHA, but they send an ex officio member to our meetings, but I think it would be more apropos for a staff person to attend the meetings on behalf of the Department of Development. And the next comment is, if we can avoid it, Mondays as an alternate meeting day when things occur, it's not good for Commissioner Scott, and it's really not good for myself either. So for an occurrence in the future, if we can stay away from Mondays, if we have to move the Tuesday meeting date for the EDA, we would appreciate it. I think I can speak on behalf of Commissioner Scott on that and myself. And the other thing is, it was an exciting weekend this past weekend. IC Norcom High School Grand Reunion was held, and quite a few outstanding Norcomian graduates are in this city and came from far and wide to attend this weekend. Just among our city council members, if I'm not mistaken, we have 4 council members who graduated from IC Norcom High School. And if we consider past city council members, I think there is an additional council member also, making a total of at least 5 that I know of. And so it was a great event. And my only wish going forward is that the Renaissance finds a way to capture hosting such an event in the future. But certainly the city of Portsmouth benefited from this IC Norcom High School Grand Reunion event. Personally, I have at least 8 generations of my family who attended IC Norcom High School, and I was fortunate enough to have among classmates the great-grandchildren of Israel Charles Norcom, to whom the high school is named after.
Wow.
Those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I have 2 comments. Actually, 1 comment, 1 request. Actually, both of them will be requests. First, I saw the City Council presentation from the Renaissance, and that is an exciting renovation that is taking place. We did have a presentation some time ago when this first came on the radar. I'd like to see if we could possibly have a short presentation in a future
With the
EDA meeting, as since we do have a vested interest there. It's exciting. Any more eyes we can put on that, it's going to be a great publicity for them. The other item was an item that was brought forward and kind of near and dear to my heart. And again, I thank Robert and his staff for putting this together. But I'd like to maybe get an update on is the Hire Portsmouth initiative. Maybe not immediately, but in the next couple meetings, if we can just kind of get just an update on that, or and any role that this body can possibly play into it as well, would be helpful. I know you're working feverishly on it, and I think the citizens would love to kind of hear about that as well.
I concur with that. Mm-hmm.
Anybody else, Ms. Link?
Nope, no, I don't have anything this month.
Oh, I did have one more thing. The ODU, what was that? The Hampton Road study. That was, they had a luncheon or something. Am I correct on that? The ODU
Lead Hampton
report.
Roads. Lead
The-
Hampton Roads.
Say that again.
The regional
Lead Hampton
State of the
Roads.
Region
Yes.
address.
Did they not have on the venue a luncheon or something to present that? I would really like to see the Economic Development Authority attend any future luncheons pertaining to our region and an update on the health of our region. I think that's something that we really should have been in attendance at the last one, and I would ask that we attend all future ones as a body.
So you all want a table?
Yes,
State of the region, correct?
yes, yes.
That's a good one.
Very much so.
When they were sold out, I actually tried to get tickets at the last minute. There were two. There was one south side and one in the peninsula, and
And they were sold.
and I'm on the executive board, and I couldn't get a ticket.
So that says we have to move as soon as we find out the date, or how does?
Well, they're generally this time. This kicks off the State of series.
Right.
So, so it'll be again this time next year.
So what? But not to wait till the last minute. How
Well,
do you-
they start publishing it the 1st of September. Robert and I can get together. I won't be chairing the chamber next year, but we'll get together on that and make sure that we stay involved and dialed in
Okay.
as much as possible. So,
Okay. Those are my
I will say, I
comments.
did attend. It was a very good presentation, excellent report.
Okay.
I have a bound copy of the report, actually
Yeah,
brought
I've been
back a
looking at it on
couple.
the phone.
Right, yeah, so it's, it was a very good report, and
Yeah, and my understanding is that other economic development authorities were in attendance, so we
I really
definitely
gotta
want to make.
Is it possible
make
to
that
share the report out?
commitment. Yeah,
It'd be-
you can get
be a
it
good
on
read.
the line or the phone, too.
probably
Yeah,
the
you can
chamber
send out the
website.
I'd love to read
We
it.
have a bound copy, but I think there's a digital link.
Perfect, thank you.
Anything else? A motion to adjourn?
Absolutely.
Adjourn.
Second.
Great meeting.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Chair, thank you.